everybody, and welcome to another board game review and gameplay demo. Today's game is actually a remake of a previous game from Queen Games called Res Publica. The remake is called Res Publica 2230 AD. The idea being, obviously, now it's a much more futuristic version. The original version took place in the past where you were talking about monuments and people and things like that, but now we're talking about space stations and universities and cities and all that kind of thing. But if you've played the original game, then you'd be familiar with the rules for this one. The remake of this game actually comes from the same company that made 12 Realms, and they asked me to review this one. This is actually pre-Kickstarter here, but I'm very, very excited to go over it with you guys. It's a really, really fun game that is primarily based around set collection. It's not a mechanic that you see very often, and even more rarely is it one that you see implemented in a really intuitive, easy to follow way. In this case, I really, really enjoy it, and the idea is that you've got two basic card sets. You've got technologies of different sorts, and you've got races of different sorts. Initially, you start by only drawing race cards, and the idea is that once you have a set of 5, then you can get a space station. Once you have a space station, you can start collecting technology, but I'm going to be getting into all of that when I talk about the actual demo. For now, the biggest thing for this game is actually the trade. Trade mechanics in this game are not only very, very unique, but they're very, very specific as well. There are only specific ways that you can trade. There are specific ways that you have to articulate what you want to trade or what you are asking for from other players. And it becomes a very interesting table dynamic, a very interesting back and forth between players. It's a lot of fun. It's a relatively quick game, just depending on how long you want to play it. And again, since this is pre-Kickstarter, it actually is technically unfinished, so some of the stuff is probably going to change, but I and you should be able to get a very good general idea of how the game works, and in general what's going on and what you can expect to see from a final version. But without further ado, I'm going to go right on ahead into what this game is similar to. As far as what Res Publica, or however you wish to pronounce it, Res Publica 2230 AD is similar to, the obvious choice is the original game, Res Publica, because they are exceedingly similar. It is literally a remake of that game with some new mechanics and really just sort of a big facelift in the context of what the cards do, what they look like, and obviously the time frame in which the game takes place. Other than that, there are several games that have similar mechanics to them. The biggest thing, the set collection, really reminds me of Seven Wonders, because in that game, a lot of what you're doing is trying to get the same coloration or the same mechanics, the same symbols, really, in that particular game to make stuff happen more. The thing is that set collection, like I said earlier, really is not that widespread of a mechanic, at least not in games that I have or games that I've played. But in Seven Wonders, you do get a very similar feel to this game, both in the context of trying to collect specific sets of things and to really try to synergize things together, but also in the context of the cards themselves. In Seven Wonders, you do have the drafting mechanic that allows you to somewhat sort of control what the other players are getting, whereas in this game you can control what you give or receive to a great extent. And in that way, it becomes a great deal of negotiation, which is obviously something that I greatly enjoy in games, and you can find a ton of negotiation-related games, but this one is rather unique in the context of how the negotiation works. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to go right on ahead and talk about how the game works and show you my gameplay demo for it. Alright everybody, we are here, we are set up and ready to play Res Publica 2230. I've already got all the cards distributed and everything, but before I really get started with the game, I'll go over what each individual card type does. Now you might be able to see here we have two very distinct upside down decks. Those represent the races and the technologies. Now do keep in mind this is a pre-Kickstarter, so the art's going to change. Obviously the backs of the cards will not be identical, so they can be differentiated from one another, but suffice it to say there's a couple of important things to mention here. There are special cards in each of these piles here, and I'll take out one of each type here so I can talk about them. Okay? So the race cards are the ones that we're going to start off with. Every person starts off with 4 race cards that are all mixed together. Mixed in with those are the Aturians and the pilot cards. And then mixed in with the technology cards are the cloning facilities and the troopers. Okay? Right now, we're not going to be touching the technology cards because none of us have the privilege of getting those just yet. Everybody's just going to be working off the races instead. As I mentioned, the entire point of this game is set collection. In the center of the table, we have a bunch of purple cards that represent different ways of earning victory points. Victory points are the way that we win the game, and also everybody has one of these discs. Each quadrant of the disc represents a specific goal that we want to achieve, and if we achieve all 4 goals, then the game ends. In addition, if all of the technology cards are gone, the game's final round ends as well. Okay, the basic way that a turn goes is you start off with trying to trade. The trade mechanic is a little bit weird. I'll get into it a little bit later. But then after that, you are allowed to display, which means that you display your sets or sets that you have, and you collect whatever it is that your reward is. So typically, the way that the tiering goes, the first thing that you're going to be getting is a space station. The space station requires 5 of the same type of race card, and after you get those 5 cards, then you get the space station card, and that allows you to start drawing technology cards afterwards. Okay, so once you get that, you can start drawing the technology cards at the end of your turn, and then you can start building cities. The cities require 5 technologies of the same type, and they are actually ranked from 9 points all the way down to 4. So no matter what, it's going to be more worthwhile than a space station, but at the same time, you got to make sure to go relatively quickly because there's only 1 9. And then after that, their numbers are incremental, 9, 8, 7, 6, etc., etc. Right? Other than that, you've got the new colony, which requires 3 of a single type of race card and 3 of a single type of technology card. And what that allows you to do is to actually, essentially, just give a card to another player. Just give it to them. It's not a trade. You give them a card, and then you take one of the cards that they have discarded in order to do the display and put the cards aside to get something. The only thing is you cannot take a pilot or a trooper. And again, I'll get to exactly what those do in a little bit, right? The next type of scoring card is the resort card. The way that you get the resort card is with 3 of these Aturian cards, these Aturian race cards, and those just give you straight up 7 points. That is very, very helpful, which makes these Aturian cards very powerful as well. The other special type of card is the University. The way you get the University is with 3 of the cloning facility cards, and those will allow you to get the city cards at a cost of only 4 technology cards instead of 5. All right, so moving on to the special ones, the pilot and the trooper are the 2 gray cards. The pilot will allow you to draw 2 race cards. Normally you can only just draw 1 race card. You can draw 2, pick 1 to keep, and the other one gets buried at the bottom of the deck. The trooper card in the technology deck acts as a wild card for any of the races. So that can be very, very powerful, especially late game as this deck is dwindling. Because once the race cards are gone, then there's just no race cards to draw. The game end round only starts when the technology cards are down. Okay, moving back to this little disc. Again, this represents different goals that every person has. This one in the top corner here represents you getting 2 space stations, earns you 3 points each for the space stations, and then an additional 3 points because you have 2. You also earn 5 points for trading in 1 of each technology type. You can tell that by the symbols on those green cards there. And then you have 5 points for having 2 cities, which are the cards that are labeled as 4 through 9, just depending on how quickly you can get there. And the last quadrant is actually not directly addressed in any of the rules that I've got currently, but I believe it represents how you trade, whether it's you successfully trade 3 cards at once or have 3 successful trades. I believe it's one of those 2, but like I said, it is not specifically addressed in the rules, at least the version that I've got. And again, once somebody completes all 4 of those objectives, the last round of the game begins. Okay? And as I said, everybody starts off with 4 of the race cards, specifically this pile on the, in my case, the left side of the scoring cards. And then the technology cards are all just hanging out over here on the right side as we are viewing it right now. This plays up to 5 players. I've only got it set up for 3, but we're going to go ahead and get started. The biggest thing, though, is the trading. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, one of the toughest parts of this game to wrap your head around is the trading. The thing is that once you get used to it, it's a lot easier, but until you get to that point, it can be very difficult. Now, for me right now, it might be a little bit tough simply because I'm going to have to play every single part, but what it boils down to is you do one of 2 things. You either request a specific number and type of card, or you offer a specific number and type of card. So for example, for my 4 race cards, I've got 1 Demacros, I believe is how that's pronounced. I've got 1 Terrans, and then I've got 2 Ornopians. So in this case, I would probably want to try to get more Ornopians because I've got 2 already. Now, the Terrans and the DeMarcos are things that I could probably do away with. I don't really need them very badly. So the way that this could work is one of several ways. I can say, I request 1 Ornopian, and that's it. That is my request. Or I can make an offer, and I can say, I offer 1 Terran. I'm offering it. Okay? You can also use the Boolean modifiers, the Boolean logic modifiers or arguments, I guess you would say, of and or. Those are the 2 that you can say. So I could say, I offer 1 Terran and 1 Demacros. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. All right? You could also say, I offer 1 Terran or 1 Demacros. The thing is, if you use the modifier or, the other people do not get to pick which one they get. You get to pick it. You are saying that if you trade with me, you will get either this one or this one. But it is my whim as to which one you will receive. But what you can say is, I offer this one and this one as well. You can also offer multiple cards. You can also request multiple cards. But once you make either your offer or your request, then it goes around the table where the other players will essentially make the other side of it. So if you are requesting an Ornopian, then you will say, I request 1 Ornopian. Then that means that the other people would say that they would request in return 1 Terran, or whatever it happens to be. Okay? If you say, I offer 1 Terran, then they would say, I offer whatever it happens to be. Okay? And the idea is really to try to incite more of bidding wars. As the game goes on, you start to get like doubles and triples of cards, but you know, you really want to focus on single types or maybe just 1 or 2 races. And the problem is, if it gets to the point where you've got 1 or 2 cards that you don't need, maybe you want to just trade all of them away at once relatively cheaply just to get something back, right? But a couple of very important notes. First off, there is no hand limit. You can have as many cards as you're in your hand as you absolutely can. I mean, there's no limit whatsoever. As you draw cards, you trade cards, you never throw them away. They'll always get used in some form or fashion. The other very important trade note is that you cannot combine a request and an offer. For example, I cannot say, I offer 1 Terran for 1 Ornopian. I cannot do that because that means that I am offering a Terran and requesting an Ornopian, and that is a combination of the 2 trade things that I am able to do. Okay, so as an example, let's see what this person has over here. They have a pilot, they have an Ornopian. Ooh, that's exciting. They have a Galesh, and they have a Terran, right? And let's see what this person across from me has. They have a pilot, they have 2 Skythrins, and a Terran. Okay? So what I might say here, let's say that it's my turn and it's my turn to trade, then I might say, I request 1 Ornopian. That is my trade request, and it starts going around the table. And this person will look at their hand, they'll say, well, I've got an Ornopian, what do I want for it? And they'll say, I request 1 Terran. All right, and that is what their offer is. That is their offer to give me an Ornopian. They want a Terran. Okay, and then this person, I request 1 Ornopian. They do not have an Ornopian, so they cannot make an offer. Right? You are not allowed to make an offer for cards that you do not possess. And once you make an offer and it is accepted, you have to follow through as you said it was. So right now, I've only got 1 offer because this is technically the only person who has an Ornopian. So I would probably say, well, you wanted a Terran. Look, I've got a Terran. There is your Terran and there is my Ornopian. Now I've got 3 Ornopians. I still don't have the full set of 5, but that is my trade. That's it. Okay, so you are allowed to do 1 trade during your turn, but you just need to remember that the wording can be very, very careful. And remember, if you request a specific card, people might not necessarily have it. It might be better to offer cards that you don't necessarily, that you don't necessarily need. But either way, you can also trade, if you're trading multiple cards, then say, if I really wanted to, I could say, I offer 2 Ornopians, and then somebody can offer me a single card for those 2, or they can offer me 3 cards for those 2 if they want. It's up to them. Okay, but there's a lot of a little bit funkiness with how this goes, but the rules even state that as you play more and more, then it's okay to sort of go with house rules as far as how you disclose information, what people are going to get, what you have, all that kind of stuff. But just remember, cardinal rules of trading in this game, you cannot both offer and request at the same time. You also have to stick to whatever it is that you say. If you say that you're going to give somebody a specific card, you need to give it to them. And the other major thing is that you can't, for the other players, they also cannot offer cards that they do not have, because that can potentially deter others from doing that. Okay? The other thing, though, people do have to swap at least 1 card. Right? After the trade phase is the display. That's where you say that you have 5 or 5 of a specific type, or 3 and 3, or 3 of the specific race, or 3 of the cloning facilities. I don't remember the name of the race off the top of my head, unfortunately. But then if you have nothing to display, you just don't do anything. And then at the end of your turn, you draw a race card from the race deck. And once that deck is used up, then there's just no more race cards. The game doesn't end, though. But after that, once you get space stations, then you start drawing technology cards. No matter what, though, you can only draw upwards of 3 cards per turn. So if you've got 2 space stations, you would be drawing 1 race card and 2 technology cards. So for me right now, I draw this, and look, it's another Ornopian. That is perfect for me. That's exactly what I would have wanted. Okay, so that's an example of how a player turn would go. Obviously, you would not have the cards face up while you're doing this. Everybody would have their cards by their face, just like any other card game like this. But like I said, the trading mechanic is probably going to be the toughest part for you to sort of wrap your head around. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to play through a couple of rounds so that you all can see how it works, what's going on, and just get a general idea of how this might work. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'll just go ahead and go with these other people. So this person will go ahead and play their pilot card. So that means that they get to draw 2 and then discard 1. All right. So they got 2 of the same, which is the Demacros. So the other one they bury at the bottom of the deck. Now they want to trade, so they might say, okay, I request 1 Terran. And this person over here says, I request 1 Skythrus, because that's what they've got. Me down here, I'm just like, I have no Terrans, so I make no offer. Unfortunately, this person does not have any Skythrus cards, so they can't do anything. They are unable to trade. Their trade is not fulfilled. So they draw. They get another pilot, which is pretty awesome. Okay, this person goes now, discards their pilot,
Draw 2 cards. Look, they got their Terrans. Oh, and the Aturians. So the Aturians are the ones that allow you to get the resorts that are worth 7 points, which is a pretty big deal. But what they're going to do... What are they going to do? That's a very good question. They are probably going to they'll actually take the Aturians just because they're more worthwhile there. Okay? Now, you can either decide to trade or not to trade. It's entirely up to you. And in this case, this guy has a decent amount of information about everybody. He knows, or she knows, that this person over here requested Terrans, and I gave that person a Terran and also said that I couldn't offer any. So that kind of means that, well, there's not really much that they can do as far as trading. They know that this person doesn't want Skythris, which means that maybe they have them. You don't have to try to trade if you don't want to, but it's never necessarily a bad thing. So they'll go ahead and try. They'll say, I request 1 Skythris. And me right here, I'll say, no, I don't want. I don't have any Skythris that I am willing to trade you. And this person, I have no Skythris I am willing to trade you. End of the turn, draw a card. Look at that. It's a Skythris. Awesome. All right. Now back down to this person. So... now we do the same thing. Back to the top of the round. Time to attempt a trade. Okay, well, we've got Demacros here. So we'll say, I offer 1 Demacros, because maybe somebody is looking for that. This person over here will say, well, I've got 1. I offer 1 Galish, whatever it is. Okay, this person doesn't have any Demacros, doesn't really care. They don't make an offer. I'm like, well, I don't really need a Galish, so I will refuse that offer. Okay, so nothing happens. Draw another card. Boom, look at that, a Galish. Yay! So that's really how the turns go. You can see that once you really get into the groove, it goes very, very quickly. Now, obviously, when you have more people, this game is going to get a lot more intense, and frankly, it's going to get a lot better simply because you have a lot more what you could effectively call trade stock, because there's more people that give you more availability to trade with, and that means that there are more cards on the table, more availability of cards, and frankly, just better means of getting the cards that you need in order to advance through the game. But that's really the general flow of it. And like I said, once everybody gets going, it's much, much faster. Well, it's obviously quite quick. I went through several rounds just that, but especially when everybody's going, it feels like there's not much downtime, which is very, very nice. Once you get to the point of, say, once I get my 5 Ornopians, we'll just dig through here until I find one. A lot of Skythris. There's an Aturian. Oh, look, another Skythris. Wow, there's a lot of those Skythris right next to each other. Who shuffled these? This is terrible. There we go. Ornopians. Okay. Once I get my 5th, I trade these in. I'll discard these. Everybody has their own discard pile. So I'll put those to the side. And now I've got a space station. Once I have my space station, then at the end of my turn, I'll draw my race card, and I draw a technology card as well. Technology cards, again, work the exact same way as the race cards. You're drawing, and once you get 5 of the same type, you're able to get those cities, which are really worth a lot of victory points at the end of the game. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, this is a relatively rough copy of the game, but you should be able to get a general idea of the flow. And again, playing with more people is definitely a better idea, especially with this game, simply because of the way the trading mechanic work. That is really the crux of a large portion of this game, but it's still a good game. It's a lot of fun. There's a good deal of strategy involved with it, but either way, with that, I'm going to go right on ahead now into some of my conclusions as well as the pros and cons for Res Publica 2230.
So that's it for my gameplay demo for Res Publica 2230 AD. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys got a good idea of how the game works, how you play it, and more importantly got sort of intrigued about at least trying to play it yourself. And now for my pros and cons and just some general conclusions here. The first and primary pro for me is that I really, really enjoy the game as a whole. It's relatively rare to find a good solid card game like this that is really small but rather deep all in all. And on top of that, the idea of the set collection is relatively unique, as I've said pretty much throughout this whole video. The entire thing is really, really interesting, especially the way that you've got some of the wild cards, you've got the cloning facilities, which allow you to not necessarily ignore other cards, but just give you a lot of versatility in terms of what you've got in your hand and how you're able to utilize those cards that you've got available to you. It just makes for a very, very interesting and very fun table dynamic. And that said, what is really both a pro and a con for me is the trading mechanic. This is something that a lot of players and a lot of people that I asked about this game were having a lot of trouble with, because the trading mechanic is so very specific and very, very, I don't want to say harsh necessarily, but really I can't think of a better way to put it. It's just intense, I guess, for lack of a better term. You need to make certain that you speak very, very well about either what you want or what you are willing to give. And then hopefully you're able to get whatever it is that you want, or get rid of whatever it is that you don't need, and hopefully come out a little bit on top after the trade is done. It's a very, very interesting dynamic, but again, I really consider it a pro and a con for me, because for me personally, I enjoy the trading. I like the idea of having that table dynamic, that really deep strategy of really taking the consideration into what cards am I going to try to get rid of? Do I know what the other people are going for? Just really listening to what people are asking for and maybe trying to avoid trading those away, just things like that. But at the same time, you see it as a big con, because a lot of times when you're talking about trade in games, the most common example, or rather the most pop culture based sample, is with what's it called now? I can't remember. Settlers of Catan with "Do you have wood for sheep?" So funny. But just very basic in that context, very basic trading of resources. That's something that you see all the time in a lot of different games, and it just so happens that Settlers of Catan has become a little bit more popular with people who aren't necessarily hobby gamers. But when you are used to that kind of system, when you're just saying like, I have this, does anybody have this? And when a game like this comes along and you're no longer allowed to do that, you really have to rethink and retool the way that your brain is working and thinking about how the trades are going and all that kind of stuff. It can become very, very confusing and a little bit frustrating, especially because the entirety of the trading becomes a great crux for the game as a whole. If you do not trade efficiently, then you will not win. That's just how it goes. It's unfortunate, but it's also true. And the thing is, again, it's a really major part of the strategy for the game in its entirety, rather. But overall, I really enjoy this game. I personally like it. I like the strategy behind it. I like the strategy that the unique trading system makes you do. I like the idea of the set collection simply because it's something that's relatively rarely seen. I like the fact that you've got the special buildings that give you different abilities. There is a lot of versatility here, and again, this is actually still unfinished, so it can only really get better from here on. But make sure that you check out the Kickstarter for this, Res Publica 2230 or Res Publica 2230. I unfortunately do not speak Latin, but either way, great game, lots of fun. Just be wary of your gaming group and how they might respond to that trading mechanic. Make sure that they can get along really well and that everybody really understands what's required of them. But either way, with that, thank you so very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much again for watching my board game review and gameplay demo for Res Publica 2230 AD. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and as always, please put any and all feedback into the comments below, and I've got several of my own videos linked up at the top of the page so that you can check out some more of my work. In addition, make certain that you check out the Mage Company's Bedtime Story expansion for the 12 Realm system, and come back again to check out the Res Publica 2230 AD Kickstarter once that launches as well. As always, thank you very, very much. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter at DannyCGamingSci, and I will see you later.